The Great Gospel of John, revealed from the Lord through the inner word to Jacob Lorber. Volume 7, Chapter 52 and 121. Jesus elucidates destiny or free will. The Lord says, "However, do not think that this is something which certain wise of the world call destiny, as if God had decided for every person what should happen in his shorter or longer lifespan. To think and believe this can bring death to a soul, because this is a teaching which is a secret product of hell, since it represents the direct opposite to the true principles of life out of God for men. People determine their own destiny by the wrongness of their free will and by the fact that they do not want to awaken the seven spirits in themselves, which is why they do not reach the contemplation of their inner, true and imperishable treasure of life. Thereby they go astray, wanting to seek for the true inner light of life, in the light of the world, and with joyous courage walk and act along that road. Once, however, a human soul has properly established itself in the darkest night of its created worldly arrogance, by allowing it to keep its inner freedom of will, no angel of heaven will be capable to give it another direction, and nobody can say, 'See, this was the destiny for this person.' Yes, it was very much a destiny, but not originating from God, but from the person itself. God only allows it according to the perfectly free will of man, and what I say now about a single person is also applicable to a whole nation. It is and stays the creator of its own temporal and eternal destiny. And thus it would be very wrong to assume that God has from eternity determined that all this which I have shown to you by the phenomenon and predicted with the words out of my mouth must take place. Oh no, absolutely not. Nevertheless, everything will happen as shown, because the people want it like that, since by far the greatest and most powerful part of them live comfortably and most stubbornly willingly in the very night of hell, and even now upon my mighty call do not want to leave this night of death. Because I can do no more than what I have done now, have done in the past, and still will do, if they are to keep their complete freedom of will, and he does not comprehend it, and who does not take note of it, his blindness and the great stubbornness of his heart cannot be healed by any means that one could say is true, good, and gentle. As a last effective measure, a judgment must come, but for the judgment to break loose, the cup must be full, which will, as I have said, soon be the case with this nation. And as such, do not think about it too much in fear, because not I, but the people who do refuse to change want it like this." Said Nicodemus, "But Lord and Master, then it looks extremely bad for mankind. If even God cannot help such people against their own stupid will and stubbornness, then who else could help them?" Said I, "Yes, friend, there are many earthly things which you can see and touch but do not understand. So how do you want to understand and comprehend purely spiritual things which you do not see and in any way sense? I have explained that God, because of his eternal order, may not influence man in his inner spiritual development by guiding and directing him with his omnipotence. Since if God would do this, man in himself would become a dead machine and could never reach the freest independence of life. Bring me the worst cutthroat and I will instantly change him into an angel of light. But at the same time, his individuality would be as good as dead. But as I withdraw the spirit of my omnipotent will, his individuality becomes active again, and the old cutthroat will stand before you. His love is to rob and to murder, and it is therefore his life. If you take this away from him, he is completely dead, and has totally ceased to exist. But such a man can still be bettered, and this through the extremely bad state into which he has placed himself through his evil love. But the soul of a person only then starts to think about the reason of its evil and miserable state if it finds itself in hard, self-inflicted judgment. And once the soul has started to recognize the reason, then it will soon perceive the inner desire to rid itself from its miserable state, and will start to think about the ways and means of how it can free itself from the hard judgment. And once the soul has such a wish and will, then it is also able to absorb a light which was given it from above by any suitable means. If the soul seizes the means offered, its previously evil love starts to change into a good and better love within and out of itself. It will become increasingly lighter in it, and it will step by step go to a higher perfection of life. And this is only possible by allowing the severest judgment. And therefore, a most severe judgment will be permitted to come also over the Jews, when their cup of atrocities is full. And this here and in the beyond, and this will humiliate them for all times of times, since they will never gain domination over a people. Chapter 122. The Guidance of Humanity, Knowledge, Intellect, and Free Will. He who has not yet created a sun, a moon, a habitable earth, plants, animals, and men knows certainly not how all these creatures have to be guided, sustained, and brought to their ultimate goal. I, however, know all this, and I have established an eternal order, without which nobody could achieve anything. Man, as my complete image, must also have a perfect free will, by which he has to, as far as his spiritual part is concerned, transform and strengthen himself, and make himself free from my omnipotence, so that one day he may stand next to me and live and act as a strong, free, independent, and arbitrary being. Look, all creatures are subject to laws, which are established by me. Also man, where his body is concerned. Only the soul and the spirit of man are not. That is, as far as his will and the freedom of learning and the realization of everything are concerned. The form and the structure of the soul, in all its parts, is of course also subject to laws, which are established by me, but only in such a way that, precisely because of the free will in man, he can become either very noble and strong, or very ignoble and weak. But the free will of man would be of little or no use at all if he would not have the possibility to learn and to recognize freely, and from that a reasoning that shows to the will what is good and true and what is wrong and bad. Only when man has gathered knowledge and has sharpened and awakened his intellect, the revelation of the divine will is added, which shows man the true way to eternal life and God. Then man can either accept this revelation or not, since also in relation to God he must have a completely free will, or else he would not be a human being, but an animal that has no free will but only an instinct which it cannot resist. In the beginning, only one human pair was placed on earth, and the man was called Adam, and the woman Eve. God provided this first human pair with all abilities. They had a deep understanding, a clear intellect, and a very powerful free will, by which all other creatures had to bow down. In addition to these abilities, they also received a clear and easy to understand revelation from the mouth of God, which showed them freely and openly what they had to do to reach the goal that has been set by God on the shortest and easiest travelable way. But besides that, God let them also know that they were completely free and could also act contrary to the will which was revealed by God, by allowing them to be seduced by the flesh and the matter of the world. However, thereby they would bring a judgment over themselves, and by that also their death. Well, this went very well for a certain period of time, but soon the sensual desire, represented symbolically by Moses in the form of a snake, became victorious over the realization gained from the divine revelation of what is good and true, and they transgressed the commandment in order to see what would be the result of that. And look, what the first human pair did is now done by almost all human beings. God has never failed to give great and small revelations, yet he has never forced any human being to heed them. However, blessed is the one who does heed them and directs his life accordingly. The first human pair had surely received the purest and best education from God, and would have been able to pass this on, unadulterated, to all their descendants. But just look at the people 2,000 years later at the time of Noah, then you will see that they are changed into malicious devils. Did the first human beings on earth ever lack the best education? Oh no! Have they not given it also to their children? Yes, sure, and always in the purest way. However, men felt within also the impulse to go against the commandments of God, because that was pleasing to their body, and thereby their lives fell into total decay and complete ungodliness. And when God sent men to them and admonished them in a fatherly manner to return to him, such men were soon excommunicated, expelled, and some of them were even killed in a cruel manner. Finally, those people who had turned their back to God even began to destroy the earth, and then their measure was full. They themselves opened up the gates of the subterranean great waters, which then gushed over the evil ones, by which they were all drowned. This, however, was not a judgment directly coming from God's will, but a judgment that was allowed, that had to happen in this way because of the inner structure of the earth. Because if you jump down from a high rock, face crashing and killing yourself, this is also a judgment that comes over you, but not by the will of God, but because the earth is arranged in such a way that everything that is heavy certainly has to fall down, what man, by his intellect, is quite capable of knowing. Therefore, no human being on earth is so helpless that he could not help himself if he really wants. But if already from his childhood he does not want that, he can only blame himself if he comes into distress. And what I am saying now of one person applies also to a whole nation. There is no nation on earth that could not help itself quite well if it only wanted to. But where is the will? Yes, there is more than enough will for doing what is evil and bad. But for the spiritual, which is purely good and true, the good will is lacking, because it is not according to the sensuality of the flesh. And the soul of someone who does not have such good will, as also the soul of an entire nation, goes over into the judgment and the death of matter, and then is unable and unwilling to listen, to absorb and to understand from what is of the spirit, of its light and its life. And if one wants to wake up such souls who are imprisoned in their flesh, they become mad and furious, fall upon those who are trying to wake them up, like wolves upon lambs, and strangle and tear them pitiless to pieces without any mercy. Is that then also God's fault, if such people, for the above-mentioned reasons, come into the greatest and most ungodly blindness of their soul, in which state they remain for thousands of years? If God allows a warning judgment to come over such people, this is surely fatherly good and wise. For only great misery of the flesh can turn away the soul from matter, and turn him toward the spiritual.